Midnight Mass is a gem of a series on Netflix that, despite its horror-cloaked aesthetic, is layers deeper than it appears. Written and directed by Mike Flanagan, Midnight Mass is a horror anthology about Crockett Island, a remote island located in the middle of Washington. Join us as we take a deep dive into some of the show's major themes: death, redemption, and second chances. This video will be the first part of our story and character analysis, with the focus being on Riley Flynn and the progression of his redemption arc. Major spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen the show yet, we highly recommend you do so before watching the video. Crockett's close-knit community sets the backdrop for all the events that play out during the plot. Crockett is anchored by its central worship center, St. Patrick's Catholic Church. The once strong community can barely fill the pews of the Sunday masses it once took heavy pride in. Crockett is a community on its last legs, hanging by a thread. With such a bleak present and future for the island, one could hardly be blamed for wanting to leave. Enter Riley Flynn. Riley Flynn is a big-shot tech entrepreneur living in the city of Chicago. He left Crockett Island as a college student with no plans of ever returning. Over a decade and one drunk driving accident later, he's forced to return home against his will. Riley's accident resulted in the death of a young woman named Tara Beth, netting him a potential life sentence in prison. 4 short years later, however, he's released on parole. Riley is far from over what happened. Every night when he closes his eyes, he sees flashing police lights and the mangled corpse of Tara Beth staring him in his soul. This is a recurring theme and one we'll return to later on. Riley also holds no illusions about his lack of faith. As a child, he was an altar boy, just like his now teenage brother, Warren. His time away from Crockett also turned him away from the Catholic faith completely. Judaism, Islam, Buddhism. In prison, he claims he tried it all.
I read it all. Torah, Quran, Talmud, Tao Te Ching, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, Jainism. Figured if I was looking for God, I should look everywhere.
While Riley struggles with his faith, his parents remain steadfast and devout. His father, Ed Flynn, is a fisherman for Crockett and is most directly affected by its recent economic downturn. His mother, Annie Flynn, is the family homemaker. Both of Riley's parents are highly religious and force him to go to church every Sunday, much to his dismay. Sitting in the same pews he once sat in as an altar boy, Riley feels out of place being somewhere he feels he no longer belongs. In many ways, the island hasn't changed for Riley. Even his room is the same as when he left over a decade ago, with the exception of his bed now being entirely too small. In a sense, he's traded his prison on the mainland for the prison of Crockett Island. As mentioned previously, Aaron Green is a fellow Crockett native and childhood friend of Riley Flynn. With a strong desire to escape her life on the island, Aaron ran away from home, praying she'd never return. Fate would have other plans, however, as nearly 2 decades later she would be forced to return. After a failed marriage with an abusive husband, she returns to Crockett pregnant and alone. She's forced to come back in shame to the place she swore she'd never return to. In this way, Aaron and Riley have much in common. They both return home in great shame, hoping to somehow redeem themselves for their past mistakes. Despite her situation as a soon-to-be single mother, Aaron remains hopeful and optimistic. She views her unborn baby, nicknamed Littlefoot, as her second chance at a new life. Riley takes a drastically less optimistic view. He's convinced he'll never get his old life back, telling Aaron point blank that he thinks he'll never leave the island.
I'm not getting off this island. I know it. Late at night, no matter what I might let myself hope, or what I might tell my mom or my dad, I know it.
The driving force of this feeling is a recurring dream he's had ever since he got back to the island. In this dream, he's sitting in a rowboat, alone in the dead of night, waiting for the sun to rise. He doesn't quite understand the significance of the dream yet, but knows it has to mean something. On the topic of optimism, Riley and Aaron strike up a conversation about death and the afterlife. Unsurprisingly, Riley isn't convinced. Aaron asks him, "What happens when we die?" To which Riley simply replies,
I don't know. And I don't trust anyone who tells us they do.
For Riley, it's simple. When we die, the body stops functioning and our consciousness fades out forever. But just before we fade to black, our brain releases chemicals that cause us to have an intense dream experience. One last trip before eternal oblivion. Pretty bleak, am I right? Coinciding with Riley's return is newcomer father Paul Hill, who has come to replace the older and aging Monsignor Pruitt. Father Hill is much younger than the Monsignor and brings that youth to his Sunday sermons. Hill is not alone, however, as he is able to smuggle an uninvited guest in his suitcase onto the island. Father's entrance is not met with any spectacle whatsoever. In fact, no one on the island has any idea he's coming. Arriving by the island's only ferry to the mainland, Hill's arrival goes almost entirely unnoticed except by community leader Beverly Keene. Hill comes bearing a gift, something he dubs the sacrament. For those who don't know, the Catholic Church believes that believers in Christ can receive the body and blood of Christ. Every Sunday, churchgoers are offered communion, which is the consecrated body and blood of Christ in the form of bread and wine. Communion is considered one of the central sacraments of the Catholic Church, and is the vehicle Father uses to spread the gift of his sacrament. He's convinced his gift is the key to reviving the island once and for all. Without the knowledge of churchgoers, he sneaks the sacrament into the wine of every communion. Father Hill kicks off his quest with his very first Mass on Crockett. Because church isn't very popular on Crockett these days, he speaks to a small audience of Sunday faithful. Riley, his parents, Aaron, Mayor Wade Scarsborough, his wife Dolly, and daughter Lisa make up most of that small audience. Lisa is a young teenage girl who was permanently crippled by a hunting accident when she was just a little girl. Like the Flynns, the Scarboroughs are devout in their faith. With the exception of Riley, everyone in attendance partakes in communion. After a few weeks of the sacrament, miraculous events start to happen. Suddenly, in the middle of Mass and seemingly on the command of Father Hill, Lisa Scarborough regains use of her legs. This is the first of many miracles to befall Crockett. Before long, word gets out to the entire island that Father Hill is a miracle worker. As the weeks go by, Sunday Masses start filling up. Seemingly everyone is astounded by what they're witnessing, except Riley Flynn. Riley is intensely skeptical, refusing to believe what is happening could possibly be miracles from God. He puts his guard up around Father Hill, having the strong sense that something just isn't right in the house of the Lord. Overhearing from Annie Flynn that Riley must go to the mainland for his AA meetings, Father Hill offers to hold the meetings on the island in the community rec center. It's in these weekly meetings that we see the bond between them blossom. Over time, Hill is able to warm Riley up and get him to look forward to their meetings. They meet one-on-one for weeks until one day their meetings gain a new guest, alcoholic and town drunk Joe Colley. Much like Riley, Joe Colley has a drinking problem. But unlike Riley, Joe has never left the island. He's had many opportunities to leave, but ultimately decided himself to be unworthy. Joe is not well liked by Crockett. He spends many nights a week drinking until he loses consciousness, often ending up handcuffed in the Crockett jail until the next morning. Joe's drinking became so severe that, years ago, he accidentally shot Lisa Scarborough in the spine, paralyzing her for life. This event left Joe so guilt-ridden he couldn't bear to see the sight of her in public. When Lisa is healed by Father Hill's sacrament, she decides to take the time to pay Joe a visit in his trailer. She explains that, even though she still carries a strong hatred for Joe, she's now able to forgive him for what happened.
I forgive you, Joe Colley. I forgive you, and I see you now. I see you, and I'm still angry with you. But it's different. Even now, just saying it's different. Do you want to know why it's different? Because the only thing standing between you and a better life is you.
If she got a second chance, then so should he. Looking to make good on the second chance, Joe decides to attend the AA meetings held by Father Hill and Riley in the rec center. Joe explains to Riley that, because of these meetings, he finally feels like his life is worth something. Up until this point, he never felt worthy of leaving the island, referring to himself as a, quote, glutton for punishment. Riley attends the next weekly meeting like normal, but something's off. Joe isn't there like he said he would be and doesn't show up at all. Riley immediately assumes the worst, thinking Joe relapsed and went on a drinking binge again. Father assures him otherwise. He tells Riley that Joe went off island to see his sister. This moment sets Riley's senses off. He immediately knows Father is lying because of the conversation he had with Joe the night of his first meeting. Suddenly, all trust Riley had in Father is gone. After the meeting, Riley goes home to eat dinner with his family, but he can't quite shake the feeling of knowing Father lied to his face. He tries to explain to his mother how Father isn't what he says he is, but she's having none of it. Instead, she wants Riley to focus on the miracles that are happening out of St. Patrick, and that the island is coming alive again because of Father and his masses. That same night, Riley is supposed to go see Aaron at her house, but on the way he takes a detour. He sees the lights are still on at the rec center despite how late it is. He can just sense something is wrong. He heads down the hill to the center and sees the door slightly open. He cracks the door wider only to see Father standing next to a tall, menacingly cloaked figure. The figure immediately turns and looks at Riley, then lunges at him from across the room. The figure pins Riley down and sinks its teeth in his neck. Riley can only struggle helplessly as the figure drains him of his blood. Father closes the door and shuts the lights as Riley lays dying on the floor. Little does he know, this will be the beginning of his second chance. Riley suddenly awakens the next day and finds himself still lying on the floor of the rec center. He sees Father waiting for him, sitting in the same chair he always sits in during their meetings. Riley freaks out and tries to escape the situation, but realizes he can't. When he opens the doors to go outside, his flesh starts to burn intensely, as if he's catching fire. Riley's understandably confused and angry, demanding that Father Hill explain what exactly happened to him the night before. Father Hill reveals that Monsignor Pruitt is not away, and that he has been pretending the entire time.
Who are you?
You know who I am. Come on. Really look. Listen to yourself. You know who I am. Really? You need to see the marks in my hands? Put your hand into my side?
That's not possible.
Come on, we're past that now. Bless me, Lord, for I am going to sin. Tomorrow morning I'm going to introduce myself to the parish and lie to them about Monsignor John Pruitt.
Before leaving the island for a mission trip to Jerusalem, Pruitt was in poor health. He was a man on his last legs, suffering from progressively worsening dementia. In a mental haze, Pruitt wandered off into the desert and discovered a cave with a being inside he calls the Angel. Just like Riley the night before, the Angel attacked Pruitt, draining him of his own blood. On his last breath, the Angel gave Pruitt some of his own blood, the sacrament. As it turns out, the sacrament comes directly from the blood of the Angel. Pruitt awakened hours later and discovered his ailments were fully healed, even appearing several decades younger in appearance. Believing this to be a sign from God, Pruitt decides to come back to Crockett as Father Hill, bringing the Angel along with him. But the healing powers of the sacrament come at a price. He reveals to Riley that once enough of the sacrament is consumed, its effects are almost irreversible. When a person dies with enough of the sacrament in their veins, they come back to life with an eternal thirst for blood. Riley was killed with no sacrament in his body, but, just like Pruitt in the cave, was given some of the Angel's blood in his last breath. Pruitt also reveals that he killed Joe Colley, deeming that Joe was beyond redemption and not worthy of a second chance.
He was beyond repair.
Says who?
Well, it's a cliche to say that the Lord works in mysterious ways, but he does. I can testify to that. And he worked through me, and Joe Colley was called home.
Killed him.
It's not as simple as that.
No, no.
But, in his view, Riley is. Neither Joe nor Riley ever received the sacrament, yet it appears that it was God's will to give Riley a second chance at life. Pruitt's plan is pretty simple. He wants to share the sacrament with the entire island, bringing everyone to communion with the Angel's blood. No more suffering, no more death, just eternal life for all. Of course, should this plan actually work, it will come at the cost of every human being on the mainland, something Riley realizes very quickly and puts up immediate resistance to. It's here at this juncture that Riley is given a choice to make. He can revel in the fact that he was given a second chance at life and go along freely with Pruitt's plan to unite the entire island with the Angel through the sacrament, or he can try to put a stop to Pruitt's plan. In some sense, the former would be the rational decision. He can't tackle what's coming head on, and there are plenty of others on the island already in on the plan, such as Wade and Dolly Scarsborough and Beverly Keene. If important leaders on the island are going along, why shouldn't Riley? Against all odds, however, Riley chooses to do what's right and push back against Pruitt's plan. But at what cost? Riley takes one last trip home, watching his parents and brother as they sleep. He leaves letters for each of them to read in the morning, and he makes his way over to Aaron Green's house. At this point, Riley's been missing for days. His family and Aaron have been worried sick looking for him, thinking he relapsed or fearing the worst has happened. He knocks on Aaron's door and she lets him in, but not without questioning where he's been for the past 48 hours. He answers her question with a question of his own. He asked her to go out on a boat ride where he'll promise to explain everything. the truth about Father Hill, the sacrament, and the angel. She's intensely skeptical of the story and doesn't believe it. Instead, she tells Riley that if he needs help, she'll be there for him while he gets the help he needs. It's here that he reveals the real reason why he brought her out in the middle of the ocean. Riley knows he's not strong enough to fight the temptation of the sacrament. He also knows he can't save anyone else on the island, but he can save Aaron. To save her from Pruitt's plan, he put her on the boat and stalled with conversation until the sunrise. He'll prove everything he told her to be true by sacrificing himself. As the sun rises, Riley's body disintegrates right before Aaron's eyes. She can do nothing but let out screams in horror as she watches the man she loves vanish into dust. Just before his death, Riley has one last dream. It's the same recurring dream he's been having, but this time it's different. With him is Tara Beth. She looks just like how she did before she died, untouched and unblemished. She's sitting in front of Riley on the opposite side of the boat and stands up, offering Riley a hand to stand with her. He takes her hand and stands as his consciousness fades to black for one last time. Riley's decision to reveal the truth to Aaron by sacrificing himself saved not only his little brother Warren and Lisa Scarsborough, but possibly the world. Without Riley's sacrifice, no one on the island would have had a clue as to what was coming. Despite most of the island perishing in the finale, Warren and Lisa were able to escape via boat to the mainland. Ironically, Riley made this decision because he felt like he wasn't strong enough to fight temptation. Yet, that decision was ultimately one of strength. Riley suffered on a nightly basis with the guilt he had over his accident. He had the free will to go along with Pruitt's plan, securing himself and his loved ones a chance at eternal life. Instead, he chose to do the right thing. He chose to redeem himself by sacrificing his second life for the good of not just Crockett, but the entire world. What could be more honorable than that? Thanks for watching part 1 of our series on Midnight Mass. What do you guys think of Riley's redemption arc? Leave a comment to let us know. If you enjoyed the video, show us by subscribing and giving us a thumbs up. We'll see you guys in part 2.